A new monument has redrawn the lines of royal influence, not through marble or bronze, but through soil, sunlight, and symbolism. Prince William has quietly halted plans for a Queen Camilla statue at Buckingham Palace, and in its place unveiled an entirely different vision, the Catherine Grove, a living memorial dedicated to the Princess of Wales, now blooming in the gardens of Kensington. This is not a simple design change. It is a statement, one that many royal watchers are calling the most decisive power shift since the reign of Queen Elizabeth. Welcome back to the channel, where royal history meets the pulse of modern life. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe and stay tuned, because what happened today could redefine the future of the monarchy. Before we dive into the full story, let's trace how this quiet but monumental transformation began. Just months ago, the royal calendar felt predictable. Ceremonies, speeches, polite applause. King Charles III, thoughtful but restrained, continued to champion environmental causes, yet the energy of his reign seemed to drift. Too many words, too few results. Then came Prince William, no longer merely the dutiful heir, but the architect of renewal. Behind the polished images and polite headlines, he was planning something bigger, a national movement that would root his legacy directly into the soil. That idea became the homegrown Earthshot Initiative, an evolution of his global Earthshot Prize. Instead of annual awards for innovators abroad, this new phase brought the mission home. The goal: to restore 100 community green spaces by 2030, uniting environmental recovery with emotional well-being. And at the center of this plan stood Catherine. The Princess of Wales emerged as the emotional core of the mission, her health battles, her quiet strength, her advocacy for early childhood and mental health, all shaping a vision of a monarchy that heals rather than commands. Sources close to Kensington Palace say Catherine's recovery deeply moved William. He wanted something alive, one insider shared. Not a statue, not a plaque, a living symbol of endurance. Heston, that vision came to life in late September 2025 under a clear blue sky. Standing before cameras and crowds of schoolchildren, Prince William announced, "Today we begin the homegrown Earthshot. Together, we will turn forgotten corners of our cities into living ecosystems, spaces that heal our land and our people." The reaction was electric. Social media erupted. Hashtags like #GreenCrown and #William for the win trended worldwide, eclipsing royal wedding records within hours. Polls soared, with approval ratings surpassing 80%, a number few modern royals have reached. Even long-time critics offered cautious praise. Environmental groups once skeptical of royal activism called the project authentic, practical, visionary. For the first time in years, the monarchy felt relevant, hands in the dirt instead of hands on the scepter. But as applause echoed online, another story began to surface, whispered inside palace walls and confirmed by quiet leaks from Clarence House. There had been another project planned, a bronze statue of Queen Camilla, proposed for the Buckingham Gardens to honour her patronage of literature. Sketches had already circulated among journalists, Camilla poised with an open book, a nod to her literacy campaigns. Yet the concept sparked fierce debate. Critics labelled it tone-deaf amid economic strain. Supporters called it overdue recognition. Then, without fanfare, the statue plan vanished. Funding deferred, installation under review. The project dissolved into silence. Meanwhile, new construction began at Kensington. Permits described landscape redesign, led by the Wales household. Few outside the palace noticed, until that September unveiling revealed the truth. In the heart of the gardens, surrounded by native blooms and reflective pools, William introduced the Catherine Grove, a public sanctuary merging art, nature, and mindfulness. Its centerpiece, a lotus rising from still water, engraved with the words, "Strength in Stillness, Catherine 2025. It wasn't just a tribute, it was a message. Next day headlines captured it perfectly. William's Grove outshines Camilla's statue. The green crown rises. I. In one elegant gesture, William and Catherine redefined royal legacy, replacing cold bronze with living growth. The symbolism was clear. Kensington, once Diana's sanctuary, reclaimed and reborn through Catherine's grace. Palace officials insisted the timing was coincidental, yet insiders hinted at something deeper, a generational transfer of power told through landscape, not language. Where Camilla sought permanence in metal, William planted renewal in earth. And from that moment, the balance began to shift. Public sentiment, media narratives, even court advisors started aligning behind the Waleses, the modern face of a monarchy that listens, not dictates. Camilla's circle, according to reports, felt blindsided. One aide confided, "They didn't see it coming. The Grove changed everything." No arguments, no public clashes, just quiet elegance replacing old grandeur. Behind that serenity, however, lay deliberate strategy, a new royal order, rooted in empathy and green reform. As one commentator observed, William didn't block a statue, he planted a future. But the story doesn't end here. In the days that followed, the Grove's unveiling would send ripples through every royal residence, testing loyalty, redefining alliances, and challenging what power means within the crown itself. Stay tuned. The next chapter of this unfolding royal evolution is only beginning. The morning after the Catherine Grove opened to the public, headlines across the world carried the same question. Had Prince William just rewritten royal power in real time? What began as an environmental announcement was now being described as a monarchical rebrand, a move that positioned the Waleses as the living embodiment of the crown's future. And at the center of the storm stood two women, Catherine, the nation's symbol of resilience, and Camilla, the Queen consort, whose legacy suddenly seemed uncertain. News programs replayed footage from the unveiling, the lotus sculpture catching the late afternoon sun, the princess's quiet smile, the crowd's spontaneous applause. Analysts paused the clip mid-frame, pointing out how William stepped back slightly as Catherine spoke. A subtle gesture, they said, of shared authority. Every movement was dissected. Every glance became a headline. At the same time, inside Clarence House, the atmosphere turned noticeably still. Sources close to the royal household described the Queen consort's reaction as measured, not surprised, but deeply reflective. Her aides gathered for an urgent briefing that afternoon, reviewing the press coverage. One advisor reportedly summarized it bluntly, "Your Majesty, the Grove has eclipsed the statue." End quote. The project Camilla had quietly championed for months, a statue celebrating her literary patronage, was no longer just postponed. It was politically impossible. Public appetite had shifted overnight. Where Camilla's bronze represented tradition, Catherine's garden represented transformation. And transformation was what the world wanted. The Queen consort's supporters urged her to adapt, not retreat. Some proposed rebranding the statue into a reading pavilion or an open-air book walk, something that could complement the Grove instead of competing with it. Others cautioned that any move might appear reactionary, too late, too transparent. In the end, Camilla chose silence. For days, she made no public comment, no reference to Kensington or to the Grove, but her absence only fueled speculation. Royal commentators filled the void, framing the moment as a quiet tug-of-war between two interpretations of monarchy, one rooted in endurance, the other in empathy. Television debates flared across networks. "Catherine's project feels alive," said one cultural analyst. "It grows, evolves, changes with the seasons. That's the point. Camilla's statue would have stood still. This is the monarchy's metaphor in motion." Others warned against overreading the symbolism. "This is not war," insisted a former palace correspondent. "It's succession, expressed through style." But public mood rarely waits for nuance. Online forums lit up with side-by-side images. Camilla's statue sketch beside Catherine's lotus sculpture, captioned, "Stone versus Bloom." Within 48 hours, The hashtag number The Green Crown reached 40 million views. Meanwhile, William's team at Kensington continued expanding the homegrown Earthshot network, signing partnerships with local councils and NGOs. For the first time, royal initiatives were being discussed not in ceremonial terms, but in policy language, funding, metrics, measurable outcomes. Even his critics admitted the shift was historic. Behind the scenes, Catherine remained the project's emotional engine. Palace insiders described her working long evenings, reviewing garden designs and mental health program briefs from her desk at Adelaide Cottage. "She's not the figurehead they imagine," one staff member said. "She's hands-on, every quote carved into those benches. She approved it personally." The quiet discipline paid off. In its first week, visitor turnout at the Catherine Grove surpassed projections by 300%. Teachers booked school trips. Therapy groups used the paths for outdoor sessions. Visitors left handwritten notes on benches. "Thank you for reminding us to breathe." While Kensington thrived, Clarence House recalibrated. Camilla, ever pragmatic, began hosting a series of literary charity events, smaller, more intimate, often framed as inspired by the spirit of the Grove. At one such event, she read a passage about renewal from a children's book, pausing just long enough for reporters to catch the symbolism. "She hasn't lost her poise," wrote a columnist, "but she has felt the wind change." Inside the royal family, those winds were unmistakable. King Charles, now in the reflective phase of his reign, was said to admire both women's projects, yet privately confided to aides that William's initiative had found the public pulse. The monarch's generation had spoken of duty. William's was speaking of meaning. Even Princess Anne, the traditionalist, was reportedly impressed. She visited the Grove quietly one morning before it opened, walking alone among the pathways. When asked by a photographer if she approved, she replied simply, "It's good work, solid, feels true." But beneath this calm surface, deeper currents were forming. The Grove's popularity had not only elevated Catherine, it had redefined her. In just weeks, commentators began referring to her as the moral centre of the monarchy. Odd. That title, once associated with the late Queen, now seemed to have found a new bearer. For Camilla, that shift was impossible to ignore. Her allies described her mood as composed but cautious. "She respects the change," one said, "but she knows symbols have consequences. In the monarchy, legacy isn't announced, it's absorbed." And so, in the quiet halls of Buckingham and Clarence House, new conversations began. If the Grove represented the monarchy's emotional renewal, what would Camilla's chapter look like? Could she adapt her identity to a softer age, or would she be remembered as the last of the traditional consorts? The Queen Consort chose her path carefully, aligning herself with William's project through selective support, while ensuring her own legacy remained distinct. As one aide put it, "She's not fighting the tide, she's learning its rhythm." Still, the symbolism was unmissable. In Kensington, people lined up daily to enter a garden named after Catherine. In Buckingham, the space once planned for Camilla's statue remained empty, a polished lawn, perfectly trimmed and perfectly silent. And so the monarchy stood between two symbols, a living grove that breathed with renewal, and an absent statue that whispered of restraint. This, observers said, was not scandal, it was succession in slow motion. The crown had not fallen, but it was bending towards something new. As one headline captured it, "From marble to moss, the monarchy finds its pulse." The question now was simple and seismic. Would Camilla's composure endure the weight of change, or had Catherine's Grove quietly rewritten who the crown truly belongs to? Stay tuned. The next chapter brings us inside the emotional core of this transformation, where legacy, grief, and resilience intertwine. As October unfolded, the Catherine Grove settled into a new rhythm, morning dew on the lawns, soft chatter from early visitors, the distant hum of cameras along Kensington's gates. What had begun as an unveiling now felt like a movement. The public called it the garden that listens. Inside the palace, staff described the mood as quietly triumphant. For once, the monarchy seemed in sync with the times, relevant, sincere, alive. And at the heart of that transformation stood Catherine, her calm presence shaping every leaf, every line of the project's message. Her words from the launch continued to circulate online. It stands not as a monument to one, but a mirror for many. Within a week, major broadcasters replayed the clip endlessly. On October 4, in a short follow-up interview, the princess said simply, "Healing grows where patience takes root." That single sentence became a hashtag, number strength in stillness, trending across continents. Commentators agreed that something fundamental had shifted. "This isn't performance," one analyst told ITV News. "It's philosophy." Even long-time critics admitted the tone felt different, less ceremony, more connection. Behind the scenes, work intensified. William's Earthshot team mapped new community garden pilots across northern England. Catherine, recovering strength after a difficult year, insisted on reviewing every draft and outline herself. "She reads everything," said a senior aide. "Every name, every note, every quote on those benches. Nothing leaves the palace without her mark." By the second week of October, visitor numbers to the Grove exceeded all expectations. Teachers organised outdoor lessons. Small therapy groups walked the paths as part of recovery sessions. Dozens of notes appeared daily beneath the lotus sculpture. Some prayers, some thank yous, all personal. "This garden helped me breathe again," one read in neat handwriting. King Charles visited quietly on the morning of October 10. Witnesses saw him stroll the curved paths alone, pausing often at the water's edge. Later, he reportedly told aides the Grove was a triumph of grace and restraint. Yet insiders say he also warned that visibility must be balanced with humility. "When something grows too beautifully," he is said to have remarked, "the roots must be watched carefully." Meanwhile, the world's press continued its fascination. The New York Times called the Grove a living blueprint for a modern monarchy. Le Monde described it as a crown reborn through empathy. Think pieces debated whether the project signaled a new moral monarchy, powered by public trust rather than protocol. Not everyone approved. A handful of tabloids accused Kensington of orchestrating emotional PR, claiming the Grove's gentle messaging was carefully scripted strategy. But royal historian Lorna Graham countered on Sky News. "Symbols are the monarchy's language. Catherine is simply speaking it fluently for the first time in a generation." Her quote trended within hours. In the Grove itself, expansion continued. A new children's story circle opened under the oaks, small benches arranged for readings about kindness and courage. The idea came directly from Catherine's early childhood notes. "If they find calm here young," she told a volunteer, "they'll remember what calm feels like when life becomes noisy." Mid-month saw the launch of Roots of Resilience, a pilot program linking local gardeners and mental health advocates to teach mindfulness through planting. It was small, community-driven, and instantly oversubscribed. Each participant left with a sapling and a simple card: "Grow slow, grow strong." Within royal circles, admiration was mixed with unease. Queen Camilla, ever composed, observed events from Clarence House with what one courtier called curious grace. Her long-planned statue project now seemed quietly outdated. Yet she offered no criticism, only a short message praising projects that nurture both people and planet. Behind closed doors, aides began whispering about cooperation. Could Camilla's literacy work merge naturally with Catherine's wellness agenda? Informal conversations began between their teams, with cautious optimism. Nothing official, but the tone felt diplomatic, even warm. By mid-October, the garden had become a national ritual. Early visitors spoke in hushed tones. Evening joggers slowed their stride. Journalists began calling it the monarchy's beating heart. Polls placed the royal family at its highest approval in decades. Commentators labelled the phenomenon the Catherine effect. Still, those closest to Kensington sensed both pride and pressure. "Every symbol casts a shadow," one senior aide admitted. "The Grove has become more than a place, it's an expectation, and expectations can grow faster than roots." For now, the mood remained serene. The trees turned gold, the air cooled, and the lotus sculpture gleamed under October's low sunlight. A quiet promise that resilience could be beautiful. But even as the month reached its midpoint, seasoned royal watchers were already asking what might follow. Would the Grove inspire further collaborations or rivalries? Would its message remain pure as attention intensified? Those questions hung in the crisp air of Kensington, unanswered but inevitable, hints of the delicate November ahead, when stillness itself would be tested. By mid-November, the frost had only just begun to touch the edges of the Catherine Grove. The last gold leaves clung to the branches, while the air grew crisp, heavy with that unmistakable London stillness before winter. Yet inside the palace, calm was giving way to calculation. It had been 6 weeks since the unveiling, and the Grove was no longer merely a garden, it was a phenomenon. Visitor numbers kept climbing, news crews lingered outside Kensington, and commentators debated the meaning behind every design choice. What once symbolized healing was now being interpreted as strategy. Within Kensington, William's team worked to keep the focus practical. The homegrown Earthshot schedule expanded. New community gardens were announced, and Catherine's staff quietly coordinated with mental health partners to sustain momentum. "She wants it to stay useful," one aide explained. "If it becomes spectacle, it loses soul." But the institution's machinery never truly sleeps. Courtiers began to whisper about balance, about the need to share the stage. Some wondered aloud if the Grove's success had tilted public affection too far toward the Wales household. "It's wonderful," one senior official said privately. "But when people call it the people's crown, someone at Buckingham always takes notice." King Charles, ever composed, watched carefully. Aides said he admired the Grove's impact but feared symbolic overgrowth. His handwritten memo to private secretaries later leaked. "Legacy must remain collective. Gardens bloom faster than crowns, but both must endure." Meanwhile, Queen Camilla continued her steady schedule: hospital libraries, small literacy fairs, book clubs in regional towns. Her demeanor remained gracious, though insiders described a new watchfulness in her tone. The Grove's halo was inescapable. Every story about compassion or community now carried Catherine's image beside it. To answer quietly, Camilla advanced her own project. On November 14, Palace Communications confirmed the Reading Grove, a mobile garden promoting storytelling and literacy, inspired but not overshadowed by Catherine's design. Its announcement came with impeccable timing, just as attention risked peaking on Kensington alone. The public loved it. Newspapers called it a poetic echo rather than competition. Commentators dubbed the moment the twin bloom. For a brief spell, the monarchy looked united, its two leading women cultivating parallel legacies under one narrative of renewal. Still, experts noticed the choreography. "This is how modern monarchy manages tension," said cultural analyst Freya Bennett on BBC Newsnight. "They don't argue, they plant." Inside Kensington, Catherine welcomed the Reading Grove idea publicly, sending a handwritten note to the Queen Consort. Behind the scenes, her focus remained local, fine-tuning roots of resilience and planning small winter workshops for teachers and therapists. "Keep it simple, keep it sincere," she told her team. But sincerity does not silence speculation. Late in the month, new polls revealed that Catherine had become the most popular royal figure since the late Queen Elizabeth. The numbers startled even seasoned courtiers. One advisor murmured, "Adoration is flattering until it becomes expectation." And William tried to deflect attention. Speaking at a climate youth forum in Oxford on November 22, he said, "Our work must outlast the applause." Yet his measured words only amplified admiration. Headlines read, "William's wisdom grounds the green crown." At Clarence House, Camilla's allies chose humour over defensiveness. One quipped to reporters, "If there must be two groves, at least they're both growing." The remark trended for a day, softening the tone of competition. Meanwhile, royal correspondents began to look ahead. Spring 2026 would mark the grove's first anniversary, and speculation swirled over how it might be commemorated. Would there be a joint event? Would the king attend? Would Camilla's mobile garden appear on the palace lawns as a gesture of unity? No one knew, and no one was ready to decide. For now, Kensington's paths glowed under temporary lanterns installed for early winter evenings. Visitors walked slowly, scarves drawn high, their breath forming clouds in the chill air. The lotus sculpture reflected faint silver light, its inscription, "Strength in Stillness," half hidden by fallen leaves. A BBC journalist filming at dusk summed up the scene in a single line. The grove began as a memorial, grew into a movement, and now waits to see whether unity or rivalry will shape its roots. Inside both palaces, that uncertainty was quietly acknowledged. Unity looked good on camera. Competition kept everyone alert. In truth, both forces now coexisted, the monarchy evolving not through decree, but through design. And as November drew to a close, anticipation replaced tension. Plans were whispered, calendars marked, budgets approved for spring projects yet unnamed. Everyone knew that the next bloom, literal and symbolic, would decide how history remembered this delicate season. Because by the time the first snow fell, the Catherine Grove would no longer be judged by how beautifully it grew, but by how gracefully it shared its light. By the final days of November, London's skies had turned the colour of pewter. The air hung cold but not yet harsh, the kind that hints at winter without fully surrendering to it. In Kensington Gardens, the Catherine Grove rested beneath a thin veil of mist, quiet, steady, alive. To passing eyes, it seemed unchanged, but within the monarchy, everything had shifted. 6 months earlier, a bronze statue for Queen Camilla had been on the royal calendar. Now, the symbol that defined the season was a living garden bearing the Princess of Wales's name. What began as a tribute had become transformation, a story that reshaped how the world viewed Britain's royal future. Every morning, new visitors arrived. Some came for peace, some for curiosity, some simply to stand in silence among the soft rustle of leaves. The grove had outgrown its royal origins. It belonged, unmistakably, to the public. At Kensington, the Wales household worked with measured calm. William reviewed plans for the next homegrown Earthshot sites, each inspired by the Grove's model of local renewal. Catherine read daily reports about community participation, schools turning playgrounds into sensory gardens, hospitals planting small reflection corners, city councils asking to replicate the blueprint. The movement was spreading like light through glass. "She never calls it hers," one aide said quietly. "She calls it ours." That humility had become her signature, and perhaps her power. Polls published on November 28 placed Catherine at a historic high, the most admired public figure in the country, eclipsing even her late mother-in-law's numbers from the 1,990 Analysts described it as the empathy era, a monarchy reborn not through ceremony, but sincerity. Yet not everyone found comfort in that shift. At Clarence House, Camilla's advisors held long discussions about positioning. "Popularity is weather," one aide warned. "The forecast always changes." The Queen Consort, pragmatic as ever, declined to engage in speculation. Instead, she scheduled a joint visit with Catherine to a children's hospice, a gesture of unity designed to quiet the two crowns narrative before it hardened into myth. The visit took place on November 30, under soft rain. Cameras caught the two women walking side by side beneath a single umbrella, their expressions warm but composed. Inside, they read stories to children and spoke with parents about the healing power of small joys. When asked later about rivalry, Catherine's reply was simple: "We grow best when we grow together." The quote made front pages the next morning. No rivals, only roots. It was the statement the institution needed: gentle, inclusive, and impossible to attack. In the days that followed, palace insiders noticed a rare calm settling between Clarence House and Kensington. King Charles, relieved, told aides the image of the two women together had brought grace back into balance. For the first time in weeks, the word unity appeared in headlines without irony. Meanwhile, the Grove continued to draw visitors even as temperatures dropped. The winter redesign had begun. Evergreen shrubs, silver lighting, new guided tours centered on mindfulness and reflection. Volunteers handed out small cards printed with Catherine's words, "Strength in stillness," as reminders of what the space represented. International coverage grew as well. American networks compared the Grove to Diana's Memorial Garden, calling it a bridge between grief and growth. European papers noted how seamlessly the project merged environmentalism and emotional wellness. "It's monarchy as moral ecosystem," wrote Der Spiegel. By mid-December, planning began for the Grove's one-year milestone the following spring, expected to be a global event. Early drafts proposed a family-led ceremony uniting all major branches of the royal house. The working title circulating among staff: "One crown, many roots." It was ambitious, perhaps idealistic, but within the palace, hope felt permissible again. One evening, as the garden lights flickered on under a pale moon, a small crowd gathered for the last guided walk of the season. Among them were students, veterans, and young parents pushing prams. The guide ended the tour by quoting William's words from the opening day: "We plant not for today, but for tomorrow's courage." The crowd fell silent, and for a moment, the only sound was the faint wind through the trees. A journalist nearby whispered to her cameraman, "It's strange. This doesn't feel like monarchy. It feels like movement." That sentiment spread across newsrooms. By the year's end, the Catherine Grove was no longer framed as royal ornamentation, but as cultural legacy, a living declaration that gentleness could coexist with power. Catherine herself remained understated. In a brief Christmas message recorded from her study, she thanked the public for their kindness and patience, urging them to keep finding small moments of stillness amid change. The closing line, "Because peace begins where gratitude grows," became the year's most replayed royal clip. William followed days later with a statement about the homegrown Earthshot expansion. "Our duty is to serve in ways that endure," he said. "Service rooted in the soil lasts longer than words written on stone." It was a subtle echo of his father's old speeches, but with a different tone, less formal, more human. For Camilla, time softened the glare. Her Reading Grove initiative gained traction across schools, and commentators began referring to her and Catherine as complementary forces. The statue plans, once controversial, were never revived. In their place stood something living, and that, perhaps, was the quiet victory. By year's end, the monarchy had weathered its most profound image shift in a generation, not through crisis, but creation. From Kensington's small garden, a new kind of royalty had taken root. Grounded, reflective, quietly revolutionary. As winter deepened, visitors continued to arrive at dawn, walking paths dusted with frost. Some paused at the lotus, whispering their own prayers into the cold air. Others simply stood still, watching the light unfold across the water. The Grove didn't ask for reverence. It offered something rarer: participation. And so, as the final chapter of this story closes, one truth remains. Power can command, but legacy must invite. From bronze to blossom, from rivalry to renewal, the Catherine Grove proved that the heart of the crown still beats, softer now, but stronger. Thank you for joining us through this journey of reflection, reform, and quiet power. If you found this story as inspiring as we did, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because the next chapter of royal history is already blooming, and you won't want to miss it.